I'm joined now by Tiffany Jackson, author of Monday's Not Coming.
One thing I would love to know is when you started writing, did you have sort of the Oprah aha moment where you were like, yes, I want to be able to write, or sort of what got you started in that process?
Um, that's a good question. I've actually always wanted to be an author. I've wanted to be an author since I was like 4 years old. And really what sort of like kept me going was sort of like an Oprah sort of saying is you must be obedient to the call of a dream. And I've honestly, this dream of being an author has never left me. And so even when I was working in television for about 20 years and, doing all kinds of other things, I still always was doodling and writing and just, that's something I've always wanted to do. So it sort of worked out that way. And now here I am. And I'm like, oh, this is what I was supposed to be doing all along.
Did you ever have any doubts? I know that the process of getting a book published cannot be easy. We always hear those stories about rejection letters, that type of stuff. Was there ever that fear for you of getting that successful level of being a writer?
Oh, absolutely. And especially as a Black girl, especially in our culture, we hear a lot that, oh, you don't want to be a starving artist. I was sort of, kind of pushed away from that when I used to say when I was younger. and it is hard kind of being in this industry, especially as a Black woman. We're faced with so many trials and tribulations, whether it be from like, oh, Black people don't read to trying to get paid as much as our white counterparts. So there has been a lot of hurdles that I've had to, kind of climb over because I'm not the best like track and sprint runner. But I think it was all worth it in the end. And it's not saying that I don't have struggles to this day, but it's definitely, it feels good to be in the place I'm in and knowing that, we're opening doors for a lot of other authors, a lot of young Tiffany's who are watching me do this. This is what I'm hoping that, they're inspired.
So I want to talk a little bit about Monday's Not Coming, because I think that you have multiple books, and I've seen that one seems to be the one that is recently being targeted. And so I want to start off. You've mentioned, I think previously in other interviews, that there's a kernel of truth sort of in where you sort of got the inspiration from, for lack of a better word, for Monday's Not Coming. And that is about missing Black women and girls. Talk to me a little bit about why you wanted to write about that topic.
Well, specifically, I'm very much a true crime writer. All of my books are loosely inspired by real cases. And this book is actually inspired by two real cases, one that happened in Washington, D.C., another one that happened in Detroit, Michigan. And in both situations, it was kids who were missing and had been missing for, one was for 3 or 4 months, the other one was up to 2 years, but nothing was reported on them. And I remember being a young girl and seeing like, young girls being like kidnapped in my Brooklyn neighborhood and not seeing any coverage about that. And so it always stuck with me, honestly, about the idea of when girls go missing, girls who look like me, they're not all over the news. And I really wanted to touch upon that and take it from an angle of a best friend story and like what you would do to like anything to do to find your best friend who happens to be missing.
And I think about really it's like one of the first pages where it's setting the scene of being in Washington, D.C. And I think there's a quote about being sort of in the shadow of the Capitol where the nation's most powerful people are. And I think it was very jarring. I think when we think about D.C., which is, a historically majority Black city, used to be called Chocolate City. And you set this frame up of we're in this city with the powerful people and nobody knows, nobody's talking about missing Black women and girls. Talk to me a little bit about, was it hard for you to write about that, especially when we think about, hey, there are powerful people down the street who could be solving this, who could be putting the resources into this and maybe aren't?
Because when, specifically the case that happened in DC, I was actually still in DC the time that this was happening. I went to Howard University. I worked at National Geographic at the time. And I remember when this case is specifically called the Benita Jax case, when this specifically hit the news, and it went world, nationwide, all I kept on thinking is like, well, you have all these people. There are so many ways that these kids slip through the cracks, whether it be through the school board, whether it be through teachers, mayor, like it just everybody. And I couldn't understand how we are in this city with so many important people, from diplomats to the president, that we aren't getting this type of coverage. We aren't getting this type of attention. And it still continues. Even back in 2017, there were, I think, 50 girls who went missing within like 2 months span. And the only reason why it was even noticed was that they started to post their missing persons posters on Twitter. And people were like, wait a minute, this is a lot of girls. Like, why aren't you actually like sounding like a larger alarm here? And it's devastating to see, because a lot of those girls were, 15, 16, 17. And unfortunately, a lot of times when girls those ages, specifically Black girls those ages, go missing, typically they don't get that 48-hour window. There's no Amber Alert that's called. Typically they are classified as runaways first and foremost. And then when they're finally like, okay, maybe they're not runaways, like you missed that critical 48-hour window to actually find them. But those type of like parameters aren't typically, put on, when white counterparts go missing. And so I really wanted to call attention to that. I really wanted to like shout like, hey, something's up here. But I specifically, wanted to talk to kids about this, because I think that like, sometimes when you speak to adults, there's a lot of cotton in their ears and they're not willing to listen and say like, hey, something is wrong here. But when you start to talk to kids, kids are very like, they're a fresh palate. They actually are watching and listening, and they're saying, hey, that isn't right. Especially I go to, I do school visits all across the country. And whenever I ask and talk about this book, I ask, when's the last time you got an Amber Alert on your cell phone for a missing Black girl? 9 times out of 10, they don't remember, or they've never seen it. And when I ask them to look in their database of their specific state, how many Black kids are missing, they're stunned by the numbers. And it's like, well, wait, why aren't adults doing anything? And I'm always like, aha.
I have to, I know obviously covering race and politics, there's a lot of times where it's like, I'm exhausted. I'm tired of having to write about the crappy things that are happening to my folks. I'm tired of, being a woman and having to write about crappy things that are happening to women. Talk to me a little bit about how this process, I can't imagine that it was easy for you to write about, and the research that you had to do and the emotional impact that it must have had on you. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you sort of worked through it?
Well, writing these type of stories, whether it's this book or any of my other books, which all kind of cover like pretty hard topics, it is emotionally draining. But I'm also knowing that this is work that needs to be done as well too, because it's not getting the attention that it truly deserves. And the best way to, initiate and spark change is to start with our young people. It's starting with the people who will eventually be, behind the booth and voting for officials to kind of help with these things. They can also turn to the adults in their lives and say like, hey, why aren't you doing anything about this? I always encourage, students to have a voice. But to answer your question, yes, it is quite emotionally draining, especially when you see such injustice in the world. And I've had to really balance my life with, I call it my joy toolkit. I always have like 5 things on hand that can immediately snap me back into like the joy of life, whether it be like, like a roll of cookie dough can instantly bring me joy. Or playing with my dog, or listening to some Bob Marley. It always really helps me to like find that grounding. And I think that's important in terms of like self-care when you're doing this type of work, is to know that you deserve rest, you deserve a nap, you deserve all like the finer things, despite the fact that you are still fighting the good fight at the end of the day.
So I know right now, I think we can all acknowledge, I think we would all be lying to ourselves if we didn't say that there is a cultural battle sort of happening and playing out. And it is, we are seeing our schools and our students sort of being used as pawns a little bit, I think, in this battle. And so I think about with Mondays Not Coming, and the fact that it is about young girls still at the time, they're teenagers, and who would be reading this, and then particularly Black girls are going to be reading this, and they're going to see themselves, they're going to see their community, they're going to be able to relate to this. So I'm curious for you, when did you first sort of hear or realize that Mondays Not Coming was facing these challenges of, well, it's inappropriate, or it should be banned, or it's indoctrinating our children, whatever the words that they're using these days? When did you first sort of come to your awareness that was happening?
So it first started, flames. I mean, it actually first started back in 2021, in the spring of 2021. We were still very thick in the pandemic, and still sort of kind of getting our grounding in terms of what this new world was going to look like. And I heard rumblings of, school board meetings of, parents trying to ban specifically my book in a whole district in Virginia. And it was on the Tucker Carlson's show, and, all these things were happening. And I was like, oh, they must have the wrong book, because I couldn't understand. It was being banned for sexual content. I was like, oh, I think they have, the wrong book. I think there's been a mistake. But then they were reading passages from it out of context. And I was like, oh, it's not a mistake. They just can't read. They don't have reading comprehension skills. And so I still kind of ignored it, hoping that it would go away, especially since I just felt like it wasn't worth my energy to sort of enter the chat in a way. But then it started to spread, and it became this game of telephone throughout the country. And I was like, wait, hold on a second. And I honestly got really emotional about it, and I stopped speaking about it. I know a lot of authors, and I say this all the time, a lot of authors are very active and very involved in trying to fight the good fight, and they're angry. And I'm not angry about this. I'm actually very hurt. It's very hurtful to have people, specifically parents, come and label your book completely wrong, and sort of label you as a person trying to, be a deviant to children. It's a very hurtful thing to, kind of go through. So I think that that's where I sort of been living in this space of, I'm really hurt, and I don't understand how people are not seeing what I'm seeing. It's been an interesting experience, to say the least.
How are you? You mentioned that you're feeling hurt. Is it wanted to stop you from continuing to write you mentioned there was a period of time where you didn't want to talk about it. I mean, have you sort of continued to move forward? And I can see you're so joyful and you're very passionate about what you do. And how does that hurt? How do you still find the way to feel that pride really in your work?
I think what keeps me going is actually kids. And that's one of the bigger reasons why I still continue to do school visits, and I still continue to engage with my readers, because I'm writing for them, I'm not writing for, adults. And I think talking to kids, and, every school visit, I find somebody who identifies themselves completely in one of my books, whether it's my book Grown, or whether it's Monday's Not Coming. They all identify themselves. And I think it's super important for kids, or for this next generation, to see themselves on the page, and to see themselves in an active role on the page, not just a side character, but also seeing them, in whether it be a best friend relationship, or whether it be, being the star, or being, the love interest, the full-fledged love interest in the story. I think it's incredibly important, because we didn't have that when we were younger, specifically me. I didn't see myself in a lot of stories. I didn't see myself in horror novels. I didn't see myself in thrillers or mystery novels. I had to kind of insert myself into, these characters and pretend that they were Black versus they were always white. Um, and I think I wanted that more than anything. I wanted to see myself. I wanted to like experience, a book that like talks about being a city kid. Because a lot of the books I was reading, it was mostly suburban kids. And I had no kind of concept of that as a younger girl. So I think interacting with kids have really like seriously helped me make sure that I continue this work, because it's vital. It's vital for us to keep on writing like this. And I could say for myself and all my other counterparts out there who are also being banned, we all just have it's this unsaid kind of mission that we are all going towards. And I think we're just not truly engaging with the noise.
I think about some of the defense for banned books for people who are, I don't like to put it in terms of sides, but who are kind of on the sides of we need to keep these books out here. And one of the things that you were just talking about was and as somebody who loves to read, I can agree, it's very hard when you don't see yourself in stories. I think a lot of the time when I'm reading, I often am like, oh, it's automatically a white person probably who's the narrator.
Yes.
So if you had to explain to some of these parents or administrators, Tucker Carlson, about just the importance of being able to see yourself in these books, be able to know that there's somebody who can write to your experiences. Why is that? Why are we fighting for that? Why is that so important?
I've actually questioned whether I wanted to have these type of conversations with people who are so adamant about banning these books, because how do you have a conversation with someone who is raised in hate? Why are we having these conversations with people who are raised in hate? Because they are not going to listen to facts. They're not going to listen to emotions. They're only listening to their own logic. And it's like when two people talk like this, it's really hard to get through to them. But I also feel like it's important to have these conversations and have them out loud and have them publicly, because other people are listening. Kids specifically are listening. They are watching all of this happen, and they are recognizing the dishonesty in all of it as well, too. They're watching, their parents and their friends' parents do this to their school district and be like, hey, that's not right. So I think it is important still to actually have these conversations. Even if I feel like we're talking to brick walls, I do feel like it's important because other people, specifically kids, are watching, and they can see the forest through the trees. They understand that, this is not right. And also, just because they're banning books specifically in schools doesn't mean that the kids can't access books any other way. And I think that that's what they're kind of missing as well, too. And even though they're banning books, and let's say they're banning books and kids are 17, they'll be 18 and they'll have access to all the books. I think there's this urban legend that kids stop reading at 18, that they don't read in college and they don't read after college, when in fact actually they do. So they're going to catch up on all the things that you tried to ban and then say well, why did you ban this? You are literally sparking a revolution of kids who are going to come after these same politicians and same kind of flamethrowers, as I call them. And I don't have to do anything. You are doing all the work for me.
I think about some of the other names that we have seen on banned books, and I think about Toni Morrison. I think about Alice Walker, and you are part of that list now. You are on this list of luminaries and icons who have been banned from libraries. Is there? I know you mentioned there's a lot of hurt. Is there at all a sense of pride? Your book maybe is doing something. It's doing what it was meant to do.
I mean, it is an honor to be on a list with all these incredible authors and women, and especially our grandmother of literature, Toni Morrison. It's the thought of that. But I feel like Jason Reynolds once said this about there's no badge of honor with being banned. There's nothing exciting about that for me, at least for me. And I know a lot of authors feel differently, whether it be for different reasons, but for me, it feels wrong. And I feel somewhat powerless in a lot of ways because I'm, like I said, I continue to feel like I'm fighting brick walls. I'm fighting parents who lack comprehension skills. I'm fighting people who, are literally listening to a game of telephone. Like I'm fighting, very much invisible monsters. When specifically a lot of my counterparts, my white counterparts who write in the same genre as I do, they don't have to, take time out of their day to write, to, fight these type of battles. They get to write whatever they want. Their books aren't banned. So when I think about the fact that their books include murder, include, mysteries and stuff like that, like, the real reason why we're being banned is because of the complexion of the kids that are featured in our story, not because of the content. That's just like full stop. Because my stories aren't very far from my counterparts. And so I think that that's something that, it's unfortunate, as we said in the beginning of this interview, some of the challenges I have faced. This is one of their bigger challenges where I have to stop down from just writing and enjoying, my work to fight these battles that my counterparts don't have to.
Are you worried about the message that it's sending, particularly, I think, with your story to Black girls who are reading these stories and the response is, well, we're going to ban it, or we don't want this to be read. Are you worried that little Black girls, teenage Black girls, Black women are going to see a message in that? And what would you want to say to them?
Of course I'm worried about this because, like I said, Monday's Not Coming is specifically being banned for sexual content when there is no sex actually in the book at all. Even the remote mention of it is off screen. So it's it's a complete fallacy at this point. But what I'm mostly worried about is that this story is, truly a love story between two, best friends and the idea of missing Black girls. And we need that message of the idea that, missing Black girls are not a national priority out in the world as much as possible. I mean, if we look at the statistics, 40% of missing Black children, 40% of children in general are missing Black girls. And you would never know that. And they are not looked for at the same rate as white children. And that is the crucial message of this book. And I find it, if I can be a slight conspiracy theorist here, I find it rather convenient that is the book that they are targeting, rather than targeting a lot of other books that'd be far more damaging. But if I could talk to Black girls and tell them, if I would want to tell them that they're safe, that there is a community that is totally in love with them and in love with their childhood, in love with their girlhood. I would want them to, understand that this is something that, you will be faced with these type of challenges for the rest of your life, but that doesn't define who you are. And I think that that's the most important thing here, is that everything that, you see, everything that's going on, notice that they're only attacking you. Like, notice that this is something that's happening towards you. Like, but you are the prize here, obviously. So I think I would want to assure them that, they are cared for in their community and that they are loved, beyond measure in their community. And I think that that's what I would hope to sort of push in this, when we talk about this, is to know that just because they're banning, this book doesn't mean that they're banning you.
Oh, you're gonna make me cry. It's such a beautiful message. And I think so many Black girls want to hear that, and we don't hear that message. And especially, as you're saying, when many of us know, Black girls are going missing. And I think some of us are trying to draw attention to it. And there are other forces at work that are kind of suppressing some of those stories, intentionally or unintentionally. I think it's a little bit of both. And so I think it's so important for, and maybe not just Black girls, but for the Black community as a whole to know, like, there are people who see you and know, and we're here. And I always hate to ask this question because I never feel like it should be up to whoever is being silenced or oppressed or whatever to offer insight on how to stop the oppression or whatever. But for those who are either fans of your writing or those who are aware of what's happening when we look just across all of the books that are being banned, and majority of them are written by Black women, Black men, LGBTQ folks, what would you want to see from, for lack of a better word, allies, as we're continuing to watch some of this play out in our schools and with our students?
It's so hard, right? Because I get this question a lot from educators and librarians, over the last 2 years, how do we stop this? What do we do? And I honestly turn to them and say, like, first, protect yourself. Like, I never want to tell people, put yourself in the middle of fire and get yourself fired. And like, I tell them to protect themselves. Because honestly, the kids will be okay. But if I can ask anything from them, is to continue to engage their students in learning outside of the classroom as well too, and continue to foster this love of reading, because eventually their love of reading they will find the books that they're looking for, or find the books that they really would love to read. I would continue to engage in community activism as well too. Like, there's a lot of organizations who are rallying, and they're starting to fight back against this type of oppression as well too. There are free libraries or free mini libraries. There were activists who were handing out banned books in front of places that they were, trying to ban books. So I think that that's really important for us to continue to have, even if the books are not allowed on your shelves, is to at least mention the book, have them on lists, because having a list of some of the greatest works and not featuring Toni Morrison is a gross injustice to that, child's education. Because ultimately you are stunting their growth. And I think that's really important. And especially for students, I think that, they are recognizing, especially activists, because there are a lot of students who are fighting back within their own school districts, and they are recognizing the fact that these adults are stunting their opportunities for growth. So I think it's important to support those kids, support those activists, support organizations like PEN America, who are trying to really fight back against some of these bannings, to reach out to, the politicians in their area to say, this isn't right, to make them aware of that as well too. And to also continue to be a voice. I think I love seeing all these board meetings where kids and parents are coming and raising their voice. I think that is incredibly important for us to be that sort of champion in a lot of ways. So don't just sit back and be silent.
And then lastly, and I'm sure you've seen this one coming, what are you currently working on? Can we expect to see anything soon? Another wonderful story, another wonderful book.
Well, my most recent book, The Weight of Blood, is a homage to Stephen King's Carrie. It's set at a school's first integrated prom. And it is with a Black Carrie. And that came out last September. So still sort of in the throes of that as well too. And my next book, I can't announce yet because it's a special book, but it'll be out next year, next spring. So I've had a little bit of a break for the first time, in my entire career. So it's been really great. But yes, you can find all of my books basically everywhere and anywhere you can find
Conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for thinking of me for this as well too.